Okay, well, let's give this next one a shot. It's December 8th, 2023. Another video. I just woke up this morning and said I have to do this. A great quote came to mind, and in the Vedanta Hindu books, and I just had to get this out. Again, as I've always said, this isn't about what I've thought. It's just something I get compelled when there's something that I think is really insightful, really important. And I wonder if somebody might find it interesting. I don't know. I don't try to promote it. I think in 2 years, 40 people have watched my videos. I don't. I'm not promoting it. I'm not a social media guy. I wouldn't even know how to promote it. But for some reason, I've felt that I want to do these videos, so here it goes. And this one specifically is pretty interesting. There's, let's see, there's the book, Shankara, Crest Jewel of Discrimination. Shankara, his first name Adi, A-D-I, Adi Shankara. He was a great Swami. Some people might say more than that. Sri, S-R-I, Sri Shankara. Some might say Lord Shankara. I mean, this guy did wonderful, big, beautiful things in expanding the spiritual nature of those in India. And this is around 700 AD. I don't think they know everything I've read, so they don't know the exact dates, but it was somewhere around then. He established a lot of monasteries and religious practices throughout India in that time period. What's interesting about it is that has an exact path to spirituality, self-realization, enlightenment, God, and whichever words you want to use for all of that. What's interesting, too, is he really outlines in this two different paths. Now, I had a video I did maybe 4 months ago called Basics 3. If you, at the YouTube channel, that's what it would be titled. And that has another quote that was really fantastic. And it's much more aligned to what's called Bhakti Yoga, which I've also described. And Bhakti Yoga is the path of just love, harmony, oneness, the universality of man. It just, if you worship love, whether it's consciousness, God, oneness, that's the easiest path to enlightenment. And he actually talks about that, and I kind of describe how I apply that quote that's from Shankara in my meditation. But interestingly enough, he also then has, which is the quote today, what would be called the path of knowledge, or Jnana Yoga, J-N-A-N-A, Jnana Yoga. And it's more of a challenge, and that's also known as not this, not that, in that you are continuously in meditation and in life separating out who you really are from everything else, the stuff. So they call that the eternal, who you really are, which would be your self-realization, is forever. It's soul, it's spirit, it's eternal. It's called Atman, it's called Brahman. So you're separating that, and you're being the eternal and separating out all the ugly emotions and ugly thoughts, and separating out from the stuff, the goals to have things and have your identity attached to things, your cars, your houses, and things like that. It's really a fascinating path, and I must say, I think it was Vivekananda, the great Swami of the, passed away about 1903 or 4, I believe. And he brought India essentially to America. And he said he started out as a jnana yoga guy. That's what he wanted. The path of knowledge really fell in love with bhakti, which would be the love worship, which is much more Lord Jesus and Lord Ramakrishna. So this is interesting. So on that earlier video, it tends to more talk about bhakti yoga and Shankara, and this one is a bit different. And I hope you like it. I thought about it this morning, had to make a tape, and I wanted to clarify a couple other things that I missed on my last one, which was when I went over, it's called, I think, Basics of Vedanta Hinduism, and some of the roadblocks that I had encountered. And another one was, in reading these various books, sometimes they refer to self-realization, and I got confused because sometimes they'd use a little s, self-realization, and sometimes a big S. So the little s would be Jim. The big S would be the whole package, everything. It would be God. It would be total consciousness, self-realization. And so, for example, when they say let go of self, they're talking about letting go of this little critter named Jim as being the most important thing in the world, that maybe there's something else. And so we're letting go of little s self and gaining the big S self, self-realization. And I got confused because I didn't see that. And in some texts, they kind of misword it too. And you know, these are just words. I mean, what are they supposed to do? They're going to say, sometimes you just use the word self as self. It's not even having a spiritual context. So I just wanted to clarify that. That was kind of a big roadblock until I realized my ignorance, and I wasn't reading grammatically. And once I figured that one out, it worked. So I also wanted to clarify very quickly that these are the quotes. This doesn't have anything to do with me. I sure don't come up with these things. These are, throughout these videos, are points, and it's interesting how I read it, and there was something like the quote I'll bring up in a second that I thought it was really interesting, but at the time I could not figure out how do you apply that, how in meditation can you realize these things. But that's also part of what you do. Here was this interesting quote. I forgot about it. I just kept meditating and meditating and meditating, and I meditated a lot on what's called sattva and harmony and love and kindness. I'd meditate on the wonder of my boys being born. That would always just create an intense, wonderful feeling and bliss. But this is different. This is a different method or different concept that I would meditate towards. But again, I'm not even talking about what I've gained in meditation. It's more just, isn't this a fascinating story? And then what'll happen is I might meditate for months, year, whatever, and all of a sudden, oh, that's what that meant. I totally get it now. And in a way, I think you could say that's what's meant by realization, that just by reading or intellectualizing things, that just isn't cutting it. Realization is where I don't even want to get into it. It's just becomes you. All the little roadblocks, which are very personal, and how it's all tied together just goes away. And so realization is a different concept. And really all I'm doing here is saying I thought this was one of the most beautiful quotes. And I suspect if anybody watches this video, they'll go, well, I don't know, Jim, that's got some heavy duty stuff in there. I just kept meditating and meditating and meditating, and suddenly it all makes sense. So I'll bring up the quote. We'll see how it all works. It doesn't really matter if anybody agrees or disagrees, because that's not what I'm trying to gain. I'm just saying there's I found this really interesting. Let's just leave it at that. So here's the quote. And in this, it's just very simple in the book, where Shankara says, of the steps to liberation, self-realization and being free, the first is declared to be complete detachment from all things which are non-eternal. So I just kind of talked about that. The eternal is you spiritually, and then there's We become attached to things. We can become attached to old decisions. We can become attached to new goals, old goals. We can become attached to the physical environment around us. And those things then start to control us and tell us what to do. And something happens out there and it causes a reaction in us. There's just a multitude of attachment, and those attachments then cover up who we really are. And whether it's by jnana yoga, by letting go of everything, not this, not that, I'm not those things. These things just percolate up and you just go, what am I doing? And eventually it goes away. One of the great ways to say that, I can't remember who it was, but they said it's Vivekananda. You let it dissolve into Brahman or consciousness, God. And these things come up. I've talked about it in other videos, and you let it go away. And what happens is you become less and less attached. There are descriptions on how this is. As soon as you have a thought, I thought this was a beauty by Lord Buddha. You have a thought, and now you've created space. And unless you know what happened, you can become attached to that thing. And I know I had a friend that said, I can totally relate to that with cars. People become attached to their cars and they can't even go to a party without bringing their Porsche in because it becomes part of their identity. So attachment's a fascinating deal. And so you have to let go. And if you meditate, you're going to have all these things in the mind. And there's a lot of them that as it says, complete detachment from all things which are non-eternal. So that's all that's left is you. So there's the line. I remember when I read it, I went, well, that's pretty heady stuff. Meditation is your tool, along with living in life, to figure these things out, to let the truth boil up and have self-realization. It says, then comes the practice of tranquility, self-control, and forbearance. I added the little parentheses here that forbearance means self-control, restraint, tolerance. I think that's a beauty. I mean, if you think about it, I think it was maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, I was meditating and I was thinking it was kind of hard at times and sometimes it would hurt. Things would come up and I thought, it just goes to show you, you got stuff to let go of, to detach from. Because if you can't be tranquil and for a long period of time, something's happening. Something is there. And I just thought that was a beautiful line. And it helped me, along with other things. All religions talk about humility and they talk about letting go of ego. To me, that equates to letting go of little s self. And I don't think you can be tranquil unless you can have some humility, not to degrade yourself, but to quit thinking or having your life powered by look at me, by you have to have things to build your ego. So I thought that was a really good one. You can even meditate on tranquility, self-control, and tolerance. See what happens there. Those are great points. And then it says, and then the entire giving up of actions which are done from personal or selfish desire. This was really a biggie for me. And these just came naturally. I read this 3 years ago and I never thought about it. But naturally in meditation, all of these points unfolded. They just happened on their own. That's what I think is really interesting. If you try to do it and effort it, it probably won't work. But I just kept meditating and meditating, and I just started to get to a point where those actions that were just for me, I almost didn't even want to think about them anymore. They were just gone. And as most religious practice say, if you want to feel good, go serve others, go help others. As Buddha says, there's this, he calls it the four immeasurables, and in a way he defines love. And I think it's the first one. He says, your joy is because of the joy of others. So when others are joyful, you find your joy. When others are doing well and are happy, you find happiness. It's really that's a powerful line there. Giving up the things for yourself and serving others. These were not easy for me. That's all I'm going to say. Although 50 years ago, I joined a group and I really wanted to help others. And so I know that I had some of that in me. Anyway, there it is. Then it says, then the disciple must hear the truth of the Atman and reflect on it and meditate on it constantly without pause for a long time. That's a really interesting one for me. I know sometimes when I meditate for a long time, things will kind of creep in and I'll start getting a little scared, which tells me I got more work to do. But the point, I wanted to bring up that first point, must hear the truth of the Atman. Atman is soul, spirit, bring it up in the other videos. And if you read Shankara's book, he's telling you the truth of the Atman. If you just read any of the books, Ramakrishna is fabulous. And learn the truth of the Atman and meditate on it for a long period of time. It's right there. It tells you exactly what to do. Just do it. And maybe if it's too hard, maybe the earlier steps are better, but here's your path. Talk about easy. Apply the basic principles in your living and meditate on it, and you will see change. Period. That's what I believe. Then it says, and this is really a beauty, thus the wise man reaches the highest state in which consciousness of subject and object is dissolved away, and the infinite unitary consciousness alone remains. I don't know what to say on that. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. A joke out of the 60s and 70s. I don't know. I go, yeah, that's just fabulous. Isn't that where we're going? And then it says, and he knows the bliss of nirvana while still living on earth. You can do it now. I think it was great Vivekananda and George Harrison used to quote this. He had a hard time with, George Harrison was saying in an interview, I believe, on Johnny Carson, and he said, I had a hard time with just the idea of faith. I wanted to see it. I wanted to know God, see God, talk to God, know consciousness. I didn't want, I wanted reality. And that's what Vivekananda said. Vivekananda was an unbelievable saint. They have bridges, the Vivekananda Bridge in India. I was watching a movie. It was just, maybe it was Gandhi or something, but it was just a regular movie. And in the background, I could see the images of Vivekananda and the great Ramakrishna. So these guys were only 100 years ago. This is not somebody that was 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. This is now. And anyway, I think it's really great. And he was saying it's great, wonderful because you can actually gain self-realization, nirvana, bliss now. I'm not done. I think this is a beautiful quote, though. And maybe that's why I felt it popped up and I realized certain things had been achieved and that I was moving along. Sometimes I'll get frustrated. I just want things so bad. I want self-realization so bad. Sometimes I weep about it. And then, boom, this popped. And I found the quote and I decided to do a quick video on it. By the way, I should mention, I just looked at my notes here on this, that part of the, you could call this, the detachment would be renunciation on that first line. So I'm going to go back to that first line. And even Buddha and Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, they all talk about the same thing. Part of what we're doing is letting go of cravings. So, craving money. Nothing wrong with having money. If you're a householder, you better have some money. You better take care of your family. But craving, money's a big one. Gotta have things, gotta look better than others, gotta be better. Craving, and then resistance. These are the two yin and yangs that we can meditate on and sort out, and we see those in meditation. And eventually they all just kind of dissolve away. And so that's part of also the focusing on God, consciousness, the eternal, and detaching from letting go of everything else. And I talk about that in the other video, so I'm not going to get into that now. But I think it's pretty beautiful. And all of these things, from Lord Buddha talking about love and what he means by letting go and detachment, what he means by selflessness. I don't know. To me, this encapsulates it all. And I wanted to put it out there, but there's just a ton of stuff out there, and it takes work. But it's so worth it. And so the quote, as it says on the bottom, is from Shankara's Crest Jewel of Discrimination, a great book. Amazon's got it. You can buy it. I think it's $10 or something. He's a saint. That's all I can say. So I think it's fascinating, too, that my application then of love of consciousness, love of God, also known as Jnana Yoga, I take that quote from this book, and it helps. And the same thing then on Jnana Yoga. Did I say that right in the last thing where I called it Bhakti Yoga is the worship and love of God? Jnana Yoga is knowledge, the path of knowledge. And so I take a quote from the same book. I think it's fabulous. But that's me. Other people might like other paths, other religions, other books. And as I've always said, Ramakrishna and his disciples, one of the greatest books. It's all in my other videos. And the Sermon on the Mount, as seen by Vedanta. Fabulous. So now I'm adding my third one, Shankara. I guess you'd have to say those are my top three. Anyway, I feel good. Got it out. Came up this morning in my meditation. There you have it. We'll see if anybody... The number watching my videos goes from 40 to 41. But I'm glad I did it. And even one day my sons have watched them, but they'll be able to say that's the old man one day. So that's the end of it. Thanks.